This is a time capsule that has been sealed for 50 years. Inside are drawings of the future imagined by the first batch of students. As the time capsule is opened, the principal begins to randomly distribute the letters inside to the students. As the letters are opened one by one, some see drawings of rockets, others see imaginings of technology. But when Keller opens his, he finds a sheet of paper covered in dense numbers. The boy was confused, not knowing what it meant. He took it home and showed it to his father. John, an astronomy professor, was highly sensitive to numbers. To help his son solve the puzzle, he decided to study it. He randomly wrote a set of numbers on a board. 911012996. What did this mean? John tried to divide them up to find a pattern, but it didn't seem to work, so he tried several more times, until a sequence that looked like a date appeared before his eyes. September 11th. He didn't know what it meant, so John curiously looked it up online, and was surprised to find that it was the date of the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001. What was even more bizarre was that the number 2996 was the exact number of victims. This letter was sealed in 1959, over 50 years ago. Was it a coincidence? Or could the person who wrote it predict the future? John became interested. He wrote all the numbers on the whiteboard and checked them one by one on the computer. To his surprise, the major disasters that had occurred in recent decades all corresponded to the numbers on the paper, whether it was the date or the number of deaths. Everything matched perfectly. In other words, the person who wrote the letter had successfully predicted the timing of all future disasters. However, there were still some numbers he couldn't figure out the meaning of, but it was still very strange. The next day, John went to the studio and told his colleagues about his discovery and raised a major issue. There were several dates on the paper that couldn't be verified because they hadn't happened yet, but based on the most recent dates recorded, a disaster would occur in 2 days, resulting in 81 deaths. Although the previous numbers matched the disasters that had occurred, John wasn't sure if a disaster would definitely happen in 2 days. However, just to be safe, he hoped his colleagues could help him analyze it to see if they could find the specific location and take preventive measures in advance. Upon hearing this, his colleagues believed that John must be mentally unstable. They felt this was meaningless and urged him to go home and rest. Seeing his colleagues' lack of belief, John knew his speculations alone would be hard to convince them, so he returned home to monitor news updates. The date written on the paper arrived, but after waiting all day, there were no reports of major accidents on TV. Coincidentally, it was raining that day. John was preparing to pick up his son from school. While stuck in traffic, he called his colleague to apologize for what had happened earlier. Perhaps he had overthought it, but at that moment, he accidentally noticed the latitude and longitude coordinates on the car navigation system. John immediately thought of the numbers on the paper that he hadn't figured out. He hurriedly took it out and compared them carefully. Sure enough, those extra numbers were the coordinates of a landmark. Unfortunately, the location predicted for today's disaster was right nearby. At that moment, the traffic ahead was severely congested. Had an accident really occurred? So John hurried forward to ask the police, but as soon as he opened his mouth to ask, the police officer suddenly turned pale and ran away.